Hey guys, tonight we slip into the gentle sway of a waka. Its wooden hoe creaking like it's stretching after a long nap, and the sky above is a black velvet canvas spattered with stars, so vivid it almost hurts your eyes if you stare too long. You probably won't survive this without getting slightly hypnotized because the ocean smells like wet driftwood and salt. The breeze ruffles your hair, and every so often, a splash nearby reminds you that the Pacific doesn't sleep, at least not in the way you do. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Makes it feel like you're out here with us, even if your sofa is sandier than my memory of actual sand. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the deck, barefoot, feeling the polished timber dip beneath each step. The night air is cool, salty, and slightly pungent, carrying the faint aroma of dried fish wrapped in leaves somewhere aft. Above, stars twinkle like little lanterns scattered by an absent-minded god who clearly had too much fun painting the sky. Historians still argue whether Maori navigators relied purely on star positions or blended them with ocean swells and bird patterns in a structured system. But either way, you sense the rhythm, an unspoken pulse connecting sky, sea, and human intuition. The waka hums along, responding to the subtle tilt of the ocean swell, almost like it knows you're a novice and needs to be gentle. You glance at the row of elders, their faces painted in shadow, eyes scanning the heavens with casual precision that makes you feel both awe and imposter syndrome simultaneously. One elder points a finger toward a faint glimmer on the horizon, muttering a name that rolls off the tongue like music, and you realize you're about to follow not a compass, but centuries of inherited celestial choreography. As your gaze sweeps upward, you notice patterns in the stars you've never seen before, clusters that flicker with quiet insistence. Fringe tales insist that certain constellations even whisper advice to the attentive navigator, though your logical mind smirks at the thought. Still, there's a strange comfort in pretending they do, especially with the night so vast and your options so few. Between the subtle rocking of the waka and the distant splash of fish, you start to feel like the ocean itself is a living classroom, and your teachers are the stars themselves, glowing insistently, awaiting recognition. Even as you try to take it all in, a cheeky thought intrudes. If you fall asleep out here, you might wake up in Tonga instead of Aotearoa, but hey, at least the stars don't judge. The elders hum quietly, a lullaby disguised as navigation instruction, blending lore and practicality in a way that almost feels meditative. You take a deep breath, tasting salt and wood smoke, feeling the night press around you with both intimacy and majesty. It's a reminder, the cosmos is patient, vast, and entirely unconcerned with your sense of urgency, a fact simultaneously terrifying and soothing. Your fingers graze the edge of the waka, following the grain like braille. Each touch is a subtle check-in, a reassurance that the vessel is real and under your control, or at least under the control of those who know better. The stars overhead begin to align into patterns your mind can almost recognize. There's the faint glitter of what you later learn is the Southern Cross, a tiny crucifix in the sky that has guided countless voyages long before your feet met deck. It feels surreal, standing on the edge of history, barefoot, with night pressing in from all sides. A subtle giggle escapes you as you imagine explaining this to your city friends. Yeah, we navigated across hundreds of miles of open water by staring at some pinpricks of light and listening to waves. They'd call you dramatic, but here the drama is inescapable. You breathe in rhythm with the gentle rocking, letting your body sink to the waka's soft sway. Historians still argue whether these motions are purely incidental or integral to the way Maori taught spatial awareness on open water. But right now, the only thing that matters is that the motion is hypnotic and grounding.
You catch a faint shimmer on the horizon, possibly bioluminescent plankton, or maybe just a trick of your eyes. Either way, it adds to the sensory tapestry. The faint spray of salt water, the subtle creak of timber, the chorus of unseen nocturnal creatures, and the distant hum of stars. The waka feels alive, like an organism breathing beneath you, responding to your tentative steps and the elder's assured presence. You're not just an observer here, you're a participant in a centuries-old choreography that melds cosmos and sea. Finally, the first full realization hits. You are utterly dependent on the night sky, yet it is utterly indifferent. It does not care whether you survive, whether you understand its messages, or even if you look away. And that's the magic, the thrill, the gentle terror of this moment. Between the hypnotic rocking, the whispering stars, and the quiet laughter of elders, you start to feel a connection, tenuous but exhilarating, like touching history through the tips of your fingers, the soles of your feet, and the corner of your eye where the ocean meets the starlight.
Your eyes drift from the Southern Cross to the broader tapestry above, and suddenly the night becomes less a ceiling and more a road map. You trudge along the deck, toes curling around the slippery wood, trying not to slip on the faint salt sheen. The elders move with almost imperceptible grace, checking the angle of the stars against the horizon, and you realize that reading the sky isn't just a skill, it's a full-body experience. Historians still argue whether Maori taught this through formal apprenticeships or if it was absorbed intuitively from childhood play near the shore. But either way, you feel like a rookie who's accidentally wandered into a master class. The first thing you notice is how your eyes naturally follow star lines, like invisible threads stretching across the cosmos. You probably won't survive this if you try to memorize every dot, but that's not the point. The point is to let your mind wander along the lines that generations before you have traced with care. You start mapping constellations to islands you've only ever seen on a map or in dreams. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you remember the Pacific is enormous, but under the careful gaze of these celestial markers, it feels navigable, almost intimate. A quirky thought bubbles up. One fringe navigator tale claims that if you squint at the stars just right, they seem to pulse in time with the ocean swells, like a secret Morse code only true waka masters can decipher. You chuckle, shaking your head, but there's a tiny itch of wonder you can't quite scratch. The elders hum a low, rhythmic chant that seems to mirror the ocean's motion, weaving words and beats into a subtle mnemonic. These aren't just songs, they're living instructions, a cosmic shorthand. As your gaze sweeps higher, you notice the brightness of some stars fluctuates, and an elder whispers a name you can barely pronounce, his finger tracing a line across the sky. That line is a story, a path, a warning, and a direction all at once. You're learning that seeing in Maori navigation is never passive. You're not just looking, you're interpreting, syncing, and listening to the quiet cues of the universe. Birds you can barely hear offshore are circling faintly, adding another layer of information. The stars suggest direction, but the sky and sea together form a dialogue. The main constellations begin to take shape, almost like a puzzle assembling itself over time. You spot a faint line of stars that arcs low across the horizon. This is your mental equator, the baseline for plotting where islands and currents might intersect. It's impressive, almost magical, and you realize why early European explorers were utterly baffled by Polynesian navigation. Fringe theories suggest that some navigators could even sense the temperature of the water from subtle shifts in star positions, a claim you find both ridiculous and delightfully plausible in a whimsical way. You start experimenting, lifting your arm and aligning your fingers with two particular stars. The elder nods subtly, a silent affirmation that you're thinking along the right lines. This is tactile astronomy,
The sky is no longer distant, but intimately graspable, like tracing a map in the air. Historians still argue whether this was formalized with specific teaching sequences, or if it remained almost entirely experiential. But right now, you don't care. You're feeling the stars as much as seeing them. The night air brushes against your face, carrying the salt tang and a faint hint of roasted fish from the galley. The waka sways gently, each movement testing your balance, but also enhancing your awareness of the horizon and how it relates to the celestial points above. You notice the line of Orion faintly, though it sits in an unusual position for your latitude, proof that the Pacific is a living classroom, constantly shifting under your feet. You pause to breathe, tasting the air, feeling the night in your lungs. There's an almost intoxicating rhythm to it, an unspoken lesson that the sky is not merely decoration, but guidance. Your eyes flit from star to star, following lines that curve like invisible ribbons. You realize that each star has a story, a purpose, a place in a vast mnemonic network. And while you might never fully internalize all the lore in one night, you're beginning to understand the underlying principle. Navigation is a conversation between human perception and cosmic constancy. A small laugh escapes you as you recall city lessons in geometry and latitude. It all seems so rigid. Here, geometry lives and breathes. It rocks beneath your feet and glimmers overhead. Even fringe accounts suggest that a skilled navigator could feel the drift of currents against the canoe, aligning intuition with observation to follow star lines instinctively. You feel a subtle thrill, a tiny thrill of mastery, even though you know true expertise takes years, decades of sleeping under these stars and listening to the hum of the ocean. Finally, the Southern Cross reappears in your peripheral vision, faint but steady, a kind of celestial anchor. The waka creaks gently, the waves lap rhythmically, and the elders continue their quiet hums. You take it all in, the geometry, the mnemonic chants, the whispers of the birds and the swell, and realize that this is more than navigation. It's an orchestration of senses, memory, and intuition. And for a brief, luminous moment, you feel entirely part of the cosmic dialogue, even if just as a fumbling apprentice.
You tilt your head back and let the Southern Cross dominate your attention. Its 4 main stars forming a celestial arrow that points south, like a cosmic compass etched into the night. The elders barely glance at it. They already know the bearing, but for you, it's mesmerizing, a tiny constellation holding centuries of survival knowledge. You probably won't survive this without at least a few nervous glances, because aligning your mental map to something so ancient is equal parts thrilling and disorienting. Historians still argue whether the cross was always the central guiding marker or if its importance grew as ocean voyages expanded, but for now, you treat it like an old friend giving silent instructions. The waka hums underfoot, each creak a punctuation in the dialogue between your body and the sea. You follow the line formed by the cross and notice faint neighboring stars, their positions seemingly arbitrary until an elder murmurs names that roll like poetry off his tongue. These stars, in combination, form a web of reference points called tewetu, the star guides. Some fringe accounts suggest that if you stare long enough, the cross appears to wobble slightly, an optical illusion perhaps, or a subtle hint for fine-tuning your heading. Either way, it keeps you engaged, wide-eyed, and slightly dizzy with wonder. You trace the arrow of the cross mentally, projecting it down toward the horizon, imagining where it would intersect with water and wind patterns. The elders nod knowingly at your tentative gestures, but don't offer correction. They're teaching by observation. This is tactile astronomy. Your body begins to anticipate the cosmos, your sense of balance subtly adjusted to the star's orientation. The waka leans into a swell, a reminder that even the most perfect celestial line can't account for ocean whims, which, you note, makes your sense of adventure just slightly more perilous. A cheeky thought crosses your mind. If early European explorers had seen Maori paddling by night, silently aligning to the Southern Cross, they might have assumed sorcery. Some fringe texts even claim the cross is animated in stories, moving just enough each night to remind humans that the sky is alive, a trickster teacher that demands attention. You grin, shivering slightly from the night air, imagining a star nudging you off course with a wink. The Southern Cross isn't just directional, it's temporal too. Its rising and setting provide seasonal markers that help navigators plan voyages according to moon phases, prevailing winds, and migratory bird patterns. You start to understand why Maori elders pay attention not only to absolute positions, but to subtle shifts. Slight northward or southward tilts signal changes in currents or weather. Historians still argue whether these seasonal readings were formalized or passed purely through oral tradition, but the result is astonishingly precise. Entire islands located and circumnavigated using nothing but stars and intuition. You bend slightly to trace the faint stars linking the cross to other constellations, some known to you, others unfamiliar, their names a melodic cascade of syllables. The waka drifts, sways, and occasionally jolts with the rhythm of waves, and you notice how body posture matters. Leaning slightly forward or back changes your perception of star lines, a subtle integration of human awareness and celestial observation. Fringe lore suggests that some navigators could even anticipate weather changes by subtle twinkles in the cross, a claim that makes your logical brain groan, yet your imagination leap. In the distance, the horizon glimmers faintly, possibly land, possibly bioluminescent life teasing your senses. The Southern Cross serves as your anchor, a constant reference against the mutable ocean. You realize that the constellation's importance isn't only practical, it's psychological, giving focus and calm in the vast, undifferentiated night. A light breeze ruffles your hair, and you catch the faint scent of seaweed and salt from the bow, grounding you amid the hypnotic expanse above. You take a slow breath, feeling the rhythm of the waka beneath you, the cadence of stars above, and the hum of human presence around you. The Southern Cross isn't just a constellation, it's a mentor, a silent guide, a reassurance that even in the infinite dark there is order. A playful thought pops into your head. If you ever get lost in life, maybe you just need to find your cross and follow it. The elders chuckle softly at your reverie, their wisdom passing silently, almost like the stars themselves are nudging you along the way. Finally, you commit the cross to memory, the brightest star at the top, the faintest at the bottom, and the angle they form toward the horizon. The waka continues its glide, the ocean's voice low and constant. You feel the universe tighten around you, yet also open, an expansive paradox only accessible when you truly look up, truly listen, and let the stars guide without panicking. You are learning to see with your entire being, the deck beneath, the sky above, the subtle messages in between. The waka rocks gently beneath you as you start noticing the ocean swells more clearly, not just as random movement, but as language. Each undulation whispers a story, if only you can interpret it. And right now your ears and feet are tuned to a frequency you didn't know existed. Historians still argue whether Maori navigators consciously read these swells like a text, or if it was an absorbed skill from years on water. But the effect is undeniable. The ocean itself begins to feel alive, almost like a teacher with a very subtle sense of humor. You trudge to the bow, leaning slightly to counterbalance a rising swell, and feel the rhythm in your legs. It's a slow, pulsing motion, as if the water is breathing. Fringe tales claim that some navigators could detect the difference between swells created by distant storms and those born from deep ocean currents by the faint smell of salt in the air, which sounds ridiculous, yet somehow the elders treat these claims seriously. You take a cautious sniff, nothing but the usual tang of the sea, but your mind starts mapping each rise and fall to potential courses. The night sky, now spattered with more stars than you can count, complements the ocean's patterns.
You notice how the swell direction often matches the orientation of certain constellations, a cosmic alignment that seems both random and purposeful. You probably won't survive this by relying only on visual cues, because the ocean has a voice that's subtler than the loudest star map. The interplay of water, wind, and celestial markers demands full attention, and you find yourself absorbing it like a sponge, your senses buzzing with new awareness. You glance at the elders again. They seem unnervingly calm, as if the waka swells are a lullaby rather than a hazard. One elder traces the direction of a long diagonal swell with his finger in the air, muttering the name of a distant island. The mnemonic doesn't make sense at first, but then the swell aligns with your mental map of the Southern Cross, and you feel a small thrill of connection. The universe is cooperating, at least temporarily. Historians still debate how much of this knowledge was codified versus learned entirely through intuition, but you're beginning to suspect that years of observation are more precise than any written chart. A cheeky thought makes you grin. If waves could talk, they'd probably gossip about the navigator who always stumbles barefoot on deck. You watch as the bow dips gently into a long swell and then rises with a satisfying, almost musical creak. Each motion carries subtle information about distant landforms, motion depth, and current direction. Fringe navigators claim that if you concentrate hard enough, the swell can even indicate the presence of islands before you see them, though your city-hardened skepticism bristles at this idea. Still, you start imagining it might be true. You begin matching swells with star positions. A swell moving from star point A to star point B feels like a living compass line, an invisible highway guiding the waka across hundreds of miles. You trudge carefully, toes gripping the deck, and notice the sensory layering, salt in the air, the subtle tilt of the hull, the glint of starlight on the water, and the soft murmur of elders singing guidance songs. It's overwhelming and grounding at once, a paradox that somehow calms you as your brain tries to process it all. A distant gull cries faintly, but its call isn't random. It arcs just above the horizon, and you remember a fringe claim that seabirds mimic the swells and currents, offering an extra layer of navigation. You laugh softly, imagining a gull holding a tiny clipboard with ocean charts, but the elders take it seriously enough that you hesitate before dismissing the idea entirely. The integration of stars and swells, birds and moonlight creates a multi-dimensional map your brain can barely comprehend, but your body slowly adapts to. The waka tilts on a longer swell, and your balance shifts in response, your eyes flicking upward to maintain star alignment. Every star you see now seems to have a purpose, a role in guiding the canoe safely. Even the subtle motion of smaller stars, their apparent wobble against larger stable constellations, feels like a secret message, a pulse in a rhythm older than you. Fringe lore suggests that some masters could sense this wobble and adjust heading by centimeters, a claim that makes your mind boggle, but you let it slide. There's room for wonder here. You trudge aft for a moment, watching the waka glide over the swell like it's floating on a rhythm only partially audible. It's hypnotic. Each rise and fall begins to feel like punctuation in a sentence you're slowly learning to read. A cheeky joke surfaces in your head. I thought math was hard. Try adding stars, swells, and seabirds all at once. You laugh quietly. No one else does, but you don't mind. Finally, the night stretches before you, an endless dialogue between water and sky. You feel the swell as much as you see it, an embodied map that complements the stars above. Your senses are alive in ways your city life never allowed, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, you start understanding why Maori navigators could traverse thousands of miles without modern instruments. The ocean is not just a medium, it's a teacher, a guide, a living partner in cosmic choreography. And tonight, you're just beginning to listen.
You glance skyward again, but this time your attention shifts subtly toward the horizon, where clouds drift lazily and the occasional seabird arcs over the water. Birds are more than background decoration, they're practical indicators of land and weather. You probably won't survive this if you ignore their flight paths, because certain species only venture so far from shore, returning at dusk to nesting grounds. Fringe tales even claim that some birds emit subtle calls to point navigators toward islands, a whimsical idea, but one you can't entirely dismiss when the elders nod knowingly at every passing circling gull. Historians still argue whether bird cues were formalized as part of navigation or absorbed intuitively through decades on the water, but their role is undeniable. They are moving markers in a constantly shifting world. You bend slightly, letting your hands skim the deck for balance as the waka rides a swell. The air smells of brine, faint fish, and a hint of cloud condensation. Watching the clouds, you notice their texture and movement. Low, fast-moving streaks indicate approaching weather shifts, while high, wispy cirrus hint at calm periods ahead. The elder's eyes flick from star to swell to cloud, orchestrating a symphony of celestial and meteorological cues that you're only beginning to comprehend. The patterns almost feel musical, soft, deliberate, and patient. A cheeky thought crosses your mind. So this is like Pokemon Go, but with birds and clouds. You suppress the laugh, partly out of respect, partly because the night has a solemnity that rewards subtlety. Still, the metaphor sticks. Birds swoop low, circling the waka in arcs that seem intentional. You note their flight relative to the stars above, imagining invisible lines linking their positions with constellations and distant islands. The elders barely glance at you. Their gaze is fixed on the sky, water, and feathered guides, as if they can hear the ocean humming instructions. The Southern Cross now serves as your central anchor again, but you see it differently. Swells, clouds, and bird flight combine with the cross to create a multi-dimensional grid. You start to sense a rhythm. Stars pointing south, swells moving northeast, birds circling west, together forming a subtle, living map. Fringe navigators claim that by memorizing these sky-land-water triangulations, a canoe could locate an island hundreds of miles away without sight of land. You shuffle a little on deck, testing this theory, and it's terrifyingly precise in practice. Your ears catch a faint, distant cry, a seabird or something else, and you notice its angle relative to the waka and the stars. The elder beside you hums quietly, a tone that resonates with the movement of swells. You realize song, birds, and celestial markers all work together to communicate location information. Historians still argue whether these methods were universal across Maori iwi tribes or varied significantly, but observing them firsthand, you understand the underlying principle. Nature itself is a layered instruction set, and humans have learned to read it fluently. A soft drizzle begins, not enough to soak, but enough to leave the deck slick and reflective. The stars shimmer more sharply in response, their reflections dancing in the wet timber. You bend down, careful not to slip, and notice subtle changes in the clouds and swells. The waka dips slightly into the swell, and instinctively your eyes follow the Southern Cross to ensure your heading remains steady. Even the faintest deviation feels amplified. This is precision without instruments, a conversation between human intuition and environmental cues. You start integrating memory aids, a Maori practice known as pataka wetu, where constellations and environmental signs are linked to oral narratives. Each bird's flight or cloud formation triggers a mental note, a waypoint in a story that maps the ocean. Fringe stories say some navigators could navigate by scent alone when stars were obscured, but you keep your skepticism in check, focusing on what you can perceive. There's a rhythm here, a layering of sensory information, and your brain struggles to keep pace. The night stretches on, quiet except for the occasional creak of the waka, the subtle drum of swells, and the elder's murmured guidance. You trudge aft for a moment, feeling the deck tilt beneath your feet, matching the swell with the alignment of stars and birds. The cognitive load is intense, tracking celestial movement, water rhythm, and fauna cues simultaneously,
but a strange calm settles over you. Cheekily, you imagine telling your city friends that you just spent an evening reading cloud patterns and bird gossip to navigate open water. They would probably never forgive you for sounding this poetic and competent at the same time. By now, you're starting to trust the signs. The flight of birds hints at distant land, clouds suggest wind changes, and the ocean swells reinforce your chosen path. Each element complements the other. The sky, sea, and living creatures merge into a multi-dimensional navigation system. You feel for the first time that the waka, the stars, the birds, and even the clouds are all collaborators in your journey, quietly testing your observation skills. The night is alive with subtle cues, and though exhaustion nips at your edges, a profound sense of connection hums beneath it all. Finally, as you rest a hand on the railing and watch a flock arc westward against a backdrop of shimmering constellations, the realization dawns: you are beginning to think like a navigator. Not just seeing stars, not just noting swells, not just watching birds, but weaving all these elements together into a living mental map. Fringe accounts might exaggerate this skill, but the essence is clear. Maori navigators read the environment with such precision that land becomes inevitable even when it's still hidden. You smile softly, knowing that every sensory detail you absorb tonight adds to an invisible constellation of understanding, one that will guide the waka and perhaps your imagination for the rest of the journey.
By now, your eyes are trained to wander along star paths almost automatically, and you notice something remarkable. The Maori navigators have created a mental lattice of the ocean, using stars as stepping stones. You probably won't survive this if you try to reduce it to memorization alone. This is spatial thinking in its purest, most fluid form. Each constellation becomes a mnemonic anchor, a point in a network that stretches across both water and memory. Historians still argue whether these star paths were formally named or transmitted purely through stories, but you can feel their logic emerging, like a secret geometry etched into the night sky. You trudge along the deck, letting your fingertips brush the smooth, worn timber of the waka as you align yourself with the nearest star cluster. There's a tactile rhythm to it. Eyes up, feet steady, mind tracking, body balancing. Fringe stories claim that certain navigators could recite dozens of stars in order, linking them to currents and islands, all while performing daily chores on deck. You feel a pang of awe and slight inadequacy. Your own brain can barely keep up, but the sensation is intoxicating. The elders chant quietly, a low melodic hum that seems to mirror the constellation's arrangement. You notice how their voices ebb and rise, a living accompaniment to the stars, almost like the sky itself is being interpreted musically. You probably won't survive this if you don't pay attention. One missed beat could throw off a subtle alignment. But for now, you let the chant seep into your consciousness, providing an almost hypnotic reinforcement of spatial memory. Your gaze follows a line from the Southern Cross to the faint glow of a distant star, and you mentally link it to the memory of an island mentioned in a tale earlier in the voyage. These mental maps, you realize, are more than practical. They are storytelling devices. Fringe accounts suggest that the stories themselves could encode multiple layers of navigational data, from seasonal winds to migratory birds. And while it sounds fantastical, you begin to notice the layers starting to click. The ocean hums beneath you, a constant backdrop to the starry choreography. Each swell, each subtle rise and dip reinforces the mental pathways you're constructing. You bend slightly to adjust your footing, and in doing so, notice that the motion of the waka and the alignment of stars form an intuitive coordinate system. Historians still debate how standardized these methods were across different iwi, but the principle is clear. The cosmos and the sea are integrated into a unified guidance system, honed over generations. A cheeky thought surfaces. So all this time I thought memory palaces were just for exams. Turns out they can save your life on the open ocean. You laugh softly, careful not to disturb the serene concentration of the elders, but the humor helps keep your nerves in check.
Each star you now track feels like a tangible node in a lattice that stretches across both space and narrative, binding memory to observation. You pause near the bow, tracing another star path mentally, linking it to a prior swell pattern. You notice that the direction of the stars subtly complements the prevailing currents, suggesting that navigators didn't just track islands, they predicted movement, adjusted course for efficiency, and integrated natural cycles seamlessly. Fringe lore claims some navigators could anticipate weather changes by subtle shifts in starlight intensity, and while your rational brain scoffs, you can't deny the intuition building in your own senses. By the time the night has deepened, you start noticing how oral traditions enhance this navigational system. Each story you've heard, each song hummed quietly by the elders, ties a star to an action, a direction, or a warning. You feel as if you're not just learning to navigate the ocean, you're learning to read the cosmos through narrative, memory, and embodied awareness. Historians still argue whether the stories themselves were invented as mnemonic devices or evolved from spiritual lore, but for your purposes, the distinction is irrelevant. They work, and you're following their guidance. A subtle warmth begins in your chest as you realize your body is syncing with the ocean and stars. Your breathing, your balance, your gaze, even your small jokes and internal commentary all align in a rhythm that mirrors the night itself. The waka glides, the elders hum, and the constellations shine with a quiet insistence. You feel simultaneously insignificant and intimately connected, like a thread in a tapestry that spans centuries. Finally, a cheeky, sleepy grin creeps across your face. You're starting to feel the stars not just as points of light, but as companions in navigation. Each constellation, each mnemonic story, each swell and bird flight merges into a living map, tangible yet intangible, precise yet fluid. You were learning to navigate not just with eyes, but with memory, body, and instinct, stepping further into the quiet mastery that has guided Maori across the Pacific for generations.
The faint aroma of preserved fish drifts from the galley, mingling with the briny scent of the sea, and you grab a small piece, chewing slowly as your eyes continue to dance across the constellations. Nighttime on board isn't just about stars, it's about ritual, sustenance, and subtle performances of focus. You probably won't survive this by simply staring skyward. The body needs fuel, the mind needs rhythm, and the elders remind you with soft nods that even small snacks are part of the navigation ritual. Fringe accounts claim that certain preserved foods were chosen because their taste enhanced celestial intuition, which sounds like nonsense, but you smile anyway. It's comforting to think someone centuries ago believed fish could improve star reading skills. You lean against the railing, feeling the gentle sway of the waka beneath you, and notice how the elders integrate song into their navigation. These aren't lullabies or entertainment, they're guides. You hum quietly along, a low monotone that mirrors the movement of the waves. Historians still debate whether these chants originated as mnemonic devices, ceremonial rituals, or a combination of both, but their utility is undeniable. They embed the mental map into your very body, allowing you to feel the constellations in your muscles, your breathing, your stance. A cheeky thought crosses your mind. Who knew fish snacks could double as brain fuel for cosmic navigation? You chuckle softly, careful not to disturb the serene concentration, and your laughter blends into the subtle hum of the waka. The deck creaks, waves lap softly, and the elders continue their quiet songs. You start noticing subtle variations in the chant, small inflections that correspond to directional shifts or upcoming changes in swell patterns. Each note, each pause acts as a cue, reinforcing the mental pathways you've been constructing with stars, swells, and birds. As you nibble, your mind drifts to the subtle choreography happening all around you. The elders adjust sails, check the horizon, and hum in tandem with the natural rhythms. The waka seems to respond, almost sentiently, along the swell. Fringe tales even suggest that some navigators could synchronize their paddling with the star's motion, amplifying speed or maintaining course with almost mystical precision.
While it seems a bit fanciful, the synchronization of movement, song, and celestial observation makes the waka feel like an extension of the cosmos itself. The Southern Cross dominates the night sky again, but now you see it differently. It's not just a directional anchor, it's part of an intricate network of stories, songs, and physical actions. Each minor star nearby becomes a waypoint, a reminder of islands, swell patterns, and even seasonal cues. You notice the mental layering: star as guide, song as reinforcement, snack as sustenance, body as instrument. Historians still argue whether this system was formalized or evolved organically, but it's impossible to deny its effectiveness, especially as you start to feel your own instincts align with the elders. The ocean swells create subtle echoes under the waka, almost like punctuation marks, signaling points along your journey. Birds circle faintly overhead, weaving into your mental map with their own arcs and calls. You probably won't survive this if you ignore them. Each natural element is a collaborator, not a coincidence. You feel a deepening sense of rhythm, an embodied comprehension, where navigation is not just a calculation, but a performance. Body, mind, and environment in constant, responsive dialogue. You take another bite of the preserved fish, tasting salt and smoke, feeling the grounding sensation in your stomach. A gentle breeze stirs, shifting the clouds and the reflection of stars across the deck. You notice small gestures by the elders, adjusting posture, lifting a hand slightly, humming a softer note, and realize these are subtle cues for observation. You're beginning to internalize the layered information, mentally connecting each element to a corresponding star path or swell pattern. Fringe sources claim that some masters could transmit this knowledge almost telepathically through gesture and song alone. You're starting to understand how that could feel plausible in practice. Your mind wanders teasingly to the absurdity of city life. Concrete streets, street lights, GPS beeping directions, all replaced here by the ocean, stars, birds, and chants. Yet there's a clarity in this absurdity, a precision and poetry that urban logic can't replicate. Every sensory input, taste, touch, sound, sight, melds into navigation. You feel a subtle pride in your small successes, tracing a star path correctly, catching a swell pattern, humming along in synchrony with the elders. Finally, you pause, letting the waka's gentle sway lull you into a calm awareness. Your snack finished, body nourished, mind alert yet relaxed, you sense the beauty of this synthesis. Stars, swells, birds, chants, and even humble fish snacks working together to form a living, breathing navigation system. You realize that this isn't just learning to find your way across the ocean, it's learning to inhabit it fully, to become part of the rhythm, to trust that each element, no matter how minor it seems, contributes to a seamless whole.
The night has deepened, and the stars above seem to drift ever so slightly from their positions earlier in the evening. You probably won't survive this if you ignore the subtle changes, because Maori navigators rely on seasonal shifts to anticipate currents, winds, and even the visibility of islands. You notice that the Southern Cross has risen a bit higher, while nearby constellations slide along the horizon, signaling not just direction, but timing, like a cosmic calendar etched across the sky. Historians still debate exactly how these seasonal adjustments were taught, but watching the elders adapt instinctively gives you a sense of how fluid and responsive their system really is. You trudge across the deck, toes gripping the slightly damp wood, feeling the waka respond to subtle differences in swell orientation. The stars provide a constant backdrop, but your attention shifts to how their positions shift with the seasons. Fringe accounts suggest that some navigators memorized the stellar calendar to predict everything from rainy periods to optimal sailing windows, a level of environmental awareness that blends astronomy, oceanography, and intuition. You feel a surge of respect, if not slight intimidation, for the precision that comes from decades of observation. A low hum drifts from the elders, soft and measured, their voices blending with the gentle motion of the ocean. You probably won't survive this by just following a single star. This rhythm,
This chant provides context and reinforcement, a way to internalize changes in stellar positioning over time. You find yourself humming along, eyes half closed, letting the pattern sink into your subconscious. The waka dips into a swell, and the combined sensory input of swells, stars, and chants begins to feel like a single organism, alive and responsive. You glance toward the northern horizon, noting the shift of familiar constellations. Their movement is slow but certain, and it forms invisible lines that hint at how your trajectory will need to adjust. Fringe tales claim that some master navigators could read these lines even through clouds, relying on indirect cues from wind and humidity to sense star positions. Your skeptical mind flinches at the idea, but you notice how every subtle environmental cue informs the elders' actions. It's mesmerizing, almost like watching someone conduct an orchestra composed of stars, swells, and bird calls. The Southern Cross continues to serve as your anchor, but now you realize it's not a static reference. It's dynamic, gently shifting with the seasons and the hours. Your mind begins creating mental overlays, star positions adjusted for time of year, swell angles factored into heading, bird movement incorporated into a layered map. Historians still argue whether these seasonal overlays were formally taught or absorbed through apprenticeship, but the effect is astonishing. Even your novice attempts begin to feel like navigation, not mere observation. A cheeky thought makes you grin. So, constellations aren't just pretty, they're also ancient spreadsheets. You chuckle quietly, careful not to disturb the trance of the elders, but the humor keeps you alert. I trace the path of a small star cluster in relation to the Southern Cross, imagining the invisible lines extending toward distant islands. Each subtle shift in star position nudges your internal map, guiding adjustments in both heading and expectations for swell patterns. Your body adapts to the subtle feedback loop. Eyes scan the stars, feet adjust to the waka's tilt, and your inner sense of balance syncs with seasonal shifts overhead. The ocean hums beneath you, sometimes imperceptibly, sometimes like a low drumbeat marking key waypoints. Fringe lore suggests some navigators could sense these seasonal shifts by subtle temperature differences in the water, an idea both mystifying and strangely plausible after hours of heightened awareness. You pause to note a cluster rising in the east, faint but noticeable, and connected to an oral story you heard earlier, a tale that doubles as a mental map for currents and prevailing winds. You probably won't survive this by ignoring the stories, because each narrative encodes practical guidance, like a mnemonic treasure map. The waka glides effortlessly, the elders hum softly, and the stars slide imperceptibly across the sky. Your mind and body begin to internalize this pattern, each star movement folded into instinct, not just observation. Finally, you lean against the railing, eyes tracing the Southern Cross and its accompanying constellation web. You feel the subtle dance of stars, swells, and seasonal shifts merge into a coherent mental model, one that will guide the waka even when clouds obscure the heavens. The night feels alive, dynamic, and patient, teaching you not just direction, but timing, adaptability, and trust in the rhythm of the cosmos. You realize that seasonal star shifts aren't just technical knowledge, they're a philosophy, a way to live in sync with the universe, one observation at a time.
You notice how the waka itself begins to feel like an instrument in this cosmic orchestra. Shadows stretch along the deck under the faint starlight, and you realize that the position of the canoe relative to the stars can act as a natural compass. You probably won't survive this if you ignore the subtle angles created by moonlight and starlight, because even tiny deviations in orientation can translate into miles off course across the open Pacific. Fringe tales insist that some master navigators could detect their heading by observing just the shadow of a paddle at a certain hour, a skill that seems absurd, yet somehow believable in this environment. Historians still debate whether such shadow-based techniques were widely practiced or reserved for elite navigators, but the elders treat it as routine. You trudge along the deck, keeping your gaze on the Southern Cross while subtly checking the faint shadows along the hull. The waka tilts gently with each swell, and your body begins adjusting almost instinctively. There's a physical literacy here that you've never experienced before. Your legs and core respond to changes in pitch and roll, while your eyes track stars and your ears pick up soft crests of waves. Fringe accounts suggest that this bodily attunement could allow navigators to maintain a remarkably straight course over hundreds of miles without instruments.
You marvel at the seamless integration of body, vessel, and cosmos. The elders hum softly, low notes vibrating through the timber. You probably won't survive this if you dismiss these sounds. They aren't merely musical. They are cues, subtle markers that reinforce the waka's orientation. Each hum aligns with certain star positions or swell patterns, a form of living annotation for the journey. You notice how the shadow of the mainmast aligns with a secondary constellation, giving you a secondary directional check that feels almost like cheating, but in reality is pure observation. A cheeky thought surfaces. So the canoe is both a boat and a celestial protractor. You grin quietly, careful not to disturb the trance of learning around you. The motion of the waka, the angles of shadows, and the star lines create an elegant feedback loop. You begin using your peripheral vision to track faint starlight and cross-check it with the subtle shadow cast by the bow on the deck. This dual observation sharpens your attention without conscious effort. Your body is learning the navigation faster than your mind can fully articulate. You glance skyward again, linking minor stars to the Southern Cross, forming a network of celestial checkpoints. Fringe navigators claim that memorizing these lines and combining them with the canoe's shadow allowed night crossings with uncanny precision. Historians still argue whether such method was standard practice or more experimental, but observing the elders' calm confidence leaves no doubt. It works. The waka rides the swell smoothly, as if floating along invisible lanes drawn by centuries of practice. The night air carries subtle hints of cloud moisture, affecting the reflection of stars on the deck. You bend slightly to test the angles with a fingertip, tracing the shadow of the mast, an almost playful method that feels serious under the guidance of the elders. You probably won't survive this if you don't consider light, shadow, and vessel alignment together. Ignoring even one of these layers could send you miles off course. It's incredible how the mundane and the cosmos merge. A shadow becomes a guidepost, a reflection becomes a measurement tool. Birds circle faintly above, and their movement intersects with shadow lines and star paths, forming a living triangulation system. You begin connecting each sensory input: shadow, bird, star, swell, and chant. Each element confirms the others, providing multiple layers of orientation and correction. Fringe stories say that some navigators could even detect hidden islands by triangulating stars, swells, and bird patterns simultaneously. A skill that sounds superhuman, but in the quiet focus of this night, you understand how mastery might make it possible. The Southern Cross anchors your perception, but you notice how minor stars and shadows act as secondary compasses. You trudge carefully, letting the waka's tilt guide your feet, the shadows guide your mind, and the stars guide your heart. Each step is both literal and figurative, an alignment of self, vessel, and cosmos. Cheekily, you imagine the waka whispering, "Pay attention, or we'll end up in Fiji instead of Aotearoa." The humor keeps nerves steady. Finally, you pause mid-deck, letting the canoe drift, the shadows stretch, and the constellations loom overhead. You feel a quiet reverence. This is more than navigation. The waka itself is part of the celestial system, a movable axis through the night that responds to stars, swells, and intuition alike. You are beginning to see the full integration: stars, shadows, body, vessel, and nature, working together as a living compass, a silent guide stretching from horizon to horizon.
The sky begins to hint at subtle changes as clouds thin toward the east, revealing fainter stars that you hadn't noticed before. You probably won't survive this if you ignore them. Even minor constellations act as auxiliary guides, providing additional checkpoints across the ocean's vastness. Historians still argue whether these stars were formally named or simply absorbed into memory through observation, but their function is undeniable. Fringe accounts suggest some navigators could anticipate the shifting of these faint stars based on seasonal drift, a claim that stretches belief but begins to feel plausible as your senses adjust. You trudge aft, feeling the gentle sway of the waka beneath your feet, and notice the subtle interplay of waves and moonlight on the deck. The reflections form soft, moving lines that almost mimic the constellations above. You probably won't survive this if you dismiss such optical cues. They are subtle reinforcements of your celestial map. The elders adjust their chants to match the rhythm of these visual signals, a layered system of auditory and visual guidance that begins to feel like a symphony rather than instruction. A cheeky thought surfaces. So now we're reading stars and their mirror images at the same time. Brain gym level expert.
You grin, letting the humor calm your tension as your eyes trace the mirrored star lines dancing on the wet wood. Fringe lore even claims that the reflection can subtly indicate shifts in heading due to swell or current, something only practiced navigators could interpret. You find yourself paying closer attention to each shimmer, wondering if your brain will start associating tiny sparkles with distant islands. You notice a distant flock of birds, low over the horizon, moving steadily in one direction. Their flight path seems coordinated with minor constellations overhead and the motion of swells beneath the waka. You probably won't survive this if you ignore these connections, because birds were traditionally used as indicators of nearby land or changes in current. The elders' calm monitoring of both sky and birds reinforces that everything in this ecosystem is a clue, a waypoint, a living map layered over the water. The Southern Cross remains your anchor, but now secondary stars and fleeting reflections provide nuance, guiding micro-adjustments to heading. You begin to sense a rhythm. Star positions, reflected points, bird flight, swell alignment, and even distant cloud edges all interlocking in a feedback loop. Historians still debate whether this multi-layered approach was common practice or a refinement by elite navigators, but watching the elders makes it clear that attention to detail is critical. The waka leans gently into a longer swell, and your balance subtly shifts, feet adjusting without conscious effort. Your peripheral vision picks up faint stars slightly to the east, and you mentally integrate them into your trajectory. Fringe tales claim that with enough practice, a navigator can anticipate landfall simply by observing these micro-adjustments, a concept that sounds exaggerated until your body begins instinctively syncing with all sensory inputs. You take a slow, deliberate breath, tasting salt and the faint aroma of smoked fish, letting the elements anchor your awareness. Each breath aligns with the gentle rocking of the waka and the rhythm of the stars. Cheekily, you imagine explaining this to a GPS-reliant friend. No screens, no satellites, just intuition, starlight, and bird gossip. You smile at the absurdity, but the laughter feels grounded in the reality of mastery. Navigation here is sensory, embodied, and precise. The elders point subtly to a faint eastern glow, possibly bioluminescent plankton or the first hint of dawn, and you integrate it into your mental map. Even this faint light serves as a temporal cue, signaling minor adjustments to heading and timing. Historians still argue whether navigators treated such phenomena as consistent markers or anecdotal reinforcement, but the system's elegance is clear. Every natural element is potentially informative. Your gaze returns to the Southern Cross and the constellation lattice around it, each star now linked to reflection, bird, swell, and cloud. You feel the cumulative effect, a mental map that is simultaneously visual, auditory, tactile, and intuitive. Fringe stories about master navigators being able to sense islands beyond the horizon suddenly feel less impossible. It's the integration of sensory layers that allows prediction, not magic. Finally, you trudge to the bow, feeling the waka's forward tilt as it rides a swell. Your body has adjusted. Your eyes scan. Your ears, nose, and balance all contribute. You realize the night is teaching you to read multiple dimensions at once. Stars for direction, reflections for correction, birds for land cues, swells for rhythm, and whispers of environmental change for forecasting. The ocean feels less like a challenge now, and more like a living guide, a partner in a silent, precise choreography.
The eastern horizon is beginning to glow faintly now, just enough that the darkness loosens its grip and reveals subtle details of the waka and the ocean. You probably won't survive this if you ignore the way light shifts the perception of star positions. Even the faintest dawn alters mental alignments that have guided you all night. Historians still argue whether Maori navigators timed departures to specific stellar alignments or adjusted continuously. But witnessing the elders' calm anticipation suggests both methods were in play. Fringe lore claims that some masters could predict dawn precisely by the subtle color of distant clouds, a skill that makes your city-honed instincts feel clumsy. You trudge along the deck, letting your toes grip the wet wood, and notice that the hum of the elders' chants has softened, almost blending with the rhythm of the waka swells. The faint glow from the east adds a layer of visual contrast, enhancing shadow lines and reflections that you hadn't noticed earlier. You probably won't survive this if you don't start factoring in light gradients. What seemed like fixed star positions hours ago now dances subtly, demanding micro-adjustments to your internal map. A cheeky thought surfaces. So now the universe has added filters. Great, thanks, Cosmos. You chuckle quietly, letting the humor ease your focus. Fringe tales suggest that early navigators interpreted these shifting light cues as both temporal and directional markers. You find yourself unconsciously tracing the glow along the horizon, integrating it with star positions and swell angles. The waka creaks gently beneath your feet, as if affirming your small mental corrections.
Birds begin their morning songs higher and louder than before, signaling the changing time of day. You probably won't survive this if you ignore their calls. They're not just background ambiance, they are indicators of land proximity and wind patterns. The elder's attention subtly follows the bird's arcs, reinforcing your understanding that everything, stars, swells, birds, light, is interconnected. Historians still argue whether bird observation was codified or absorbed through lived experience, but the efficiency and accuracy of these cues is undeniable. The Southern Cross now hovers near the horizon, and you notice minor constellations emerging as the light changes. You start linking each star to its historical name and mnemonic story. Fringe accounts claim some navigators could recite entire constellations' positions while paddling, adjusting heading and anticipating swell simultaneously, a feat that feels almost superhuman. But tonight, as your senses sync with the environment, it starts to feel attainable. You bend slightly to feel the deck beneath your feet, noticing subtle changes in tilt and friction. The waka rides the swell smoothly, and your body begins predicting the motion, integrating it into your orientation. You probably won't survive this if you rely solely on sight. Embodied awareness is as critical as mental mapping. The interplay of balance, touch, and visual cues transforms the experience from observation into a lived, multi-sensory skill. A soft drizzle begins, painting tiny ripples on the water's surface, and you notice faint reflections of both stars and the first hints of dawn. You start connecting these reflections with star positions, swell direction, and bird flight, essentially overlaying multiple data streams to reinforce heading. Fringe lore claims that masters could anticipate distant islands by triangulating such subtle cues. You shake your head with a mix of skepticism and awe, but you're starting to see how it could work. The elders chant softly again, their rhythm now synchronized with subtle swells and bird calls. You hum along quietly, feeling your body absorb the patterns. You probably won't survive this without internalizing the multi-layered rhythm. The chant isn't just ceremonial, it's a cognitive scaffold, guiding memory and perception simultaneously. You noticed how the waka itself seems to respond, tilting and flexing in harmony with your sensory ensemble. Your gaze flits between the Southern Cross, minor constellations, reflections, and birds. Each element confirms or corrects the others, forming a living feedback loop. You begin to feel the subtle joy of prediction, adjusting slightly for a swell, anticipating a bird's call, noting the faintest glow of dawn, all confirming that your mental map is expanding and integrating. Finally, you lean against the railing, breathing in the briny air, tasting salt and faint fish smoke. The waka glides gracefully, the night fading, and you realize that navigation here is not just skill, it's an orchestration of the senses. The stars, swells, birds, chants, and light all interweave, creating a living, breathing map that guides the waka through darkness and toward the unseen horizon. You feel for the first time an intimate connection with the ancestors who read the same sky centuries before you.
The sky continues to lighten, with a faint blush creeping over the eastern horizon, turning the ocean from a deep black into a muted slate. You probably won't survive this if you ignore the subtle changes in color, because even the faintest hue can shift your perception of constellations and affect how you mentally plot the waka's course. Historians still debate how early navigators interpreted these color shifts, whether systematically or through intuition, but watching the elders, you notice their eyes constantly recalibrating, adjusting to the subtle gradient. Fringe tales claim that the first hints of dawn could even signal optimal timing for adjusting sails or paddling rhythm, which feels almost magical, but strangely plausible. You trudge to the bow, letting the waka's gentle rocking anchor your balance, and notice how the minor stars fade into daylight, while the Southern Cross hovers low, still barely visible. You probably won't survive this by relying solely on stars now. The integration of bird patterns, ocean swells, and early light cues becomes essential. The elders' murmurs turn into a soft, continuous chant, harmonizing with the rhythm of the waka. You hum along, feeling your body subconsciously synchronize with the ocean and the environment. A cheeky thought pops up. So now I'm reading color gradients like a cosmic mood ring. You laugh quietly, aware that humor is your secret ally for staying alert during the long night to dawn transition. Fringe accounts suggest that some master navigators could detect approaching weather changes just from subtle shifts in dawn light, a skill that you now begin to appreciate as a combination of experience, attention, and instinct. Birds soar higher, calling crisply as they announce the morning. Their flight paths intersect with faint star lines and swell direction, creating a multi-layered map in your mind. You probably won't survive this if you fail to observe them, because their arcs indicate nearby land, prevailing winds, or changes in current. Historians still debate whether bird flight observation was codified or entirely intuitive, but watching the elders, it's clear that every detail informs the navigation system. The waka tilts gently as a long swell approaches from the southeast, and your body responds automatically. Minor adjustments in posture and foot placement align you perfectly with the subtle rhythm of waves. Fringe tales claim that navigators could use this embodied awareness to maintain a straight course for days without seeing land. You smile wryly at the thought and note how it's not mystical, just an intense, intimate familiarity with water, vessel, and sky. Your eyes trace the remaining visible stars, linking them to memory songs the elders whispered during the night. Each constellation now carries multiple layers of information: heading, swell alignment, seasonal timing, and mnemonic story. You probably won't survive this if you neglect these layers. Every star is a waypoint, every song a guide. The waka glides smoothly, each swell reinforcing the mental map you've been building all night. A faint glow on the horizon signals the first definitive light of dawn, and you integrate it into your cognitive map. Shadows shrink, reflections dim, and your attention shifts toward interpreting the water's subtle cues, now enhanced by the soft daylight. Fringe lore claims that dawn is the perfect test for a navigator's skill, when stars vanish but the environmental cues remain. You feel the challenge resonate in your chest, transition without losing precision. The elders' chants soften, turning into quiet hums that blend with the light breeze and gentle wave lapping. You hum along, letting the rhythm seep into your muscles and balance. You probably won't survive this if you disconnect body from mind. Navigation here is an orchestration of the senses, where sight, touch, hearing, and intuition merge seamlessly. Finally, you pause mid-deck, letting your gaze drift between fading stars, rising sun, and distant clouds. The waka continues to glide, perfectly aligned, a living vessel guided by ancestral knowledge and acute perception. You realize that you've internalized the multi-layered system: stars, birds, swells, shadows, chants, and light cues, all converging into a living, breathing map. The night has ended, but the journey continues, and you feel the quiet thrill of understanding, connection, and mastery taking root in your body and mind.
The sky now brightens steadily, the eastern horizon a soft wash of pink and gold, and the ocean reflects it in a gentle shimmer. You probably won't survive this if you ignore the subtle interplay of light and water. Even the faintest reflection affects how you perceive swell patterns and horizon lines. Historians still debate whether early navigators consciously used these light gradients or absorbed them intuitively over years of voyaging. But observing the elders, it's clear that awareness of color, angle, and shimmer is integral to maintaining course. Fringe accounts suggest that minute variations in dawn light could indicate wind shifts or distant land, a notion that seems improbable until you start noticing patterns yourself. You trudge to the bow, the waka responding beneath your feet like a living entity. The last stars fade slowly, leaving only the Southern Cross near the horizon as a faint anchor. You probably won't survive this if you ignore birds, swells, and cloud reflections, all of which now take precedence in your mental map. The elders' humming has transformed into almost imperceptible breathing-like rhythms, synchronizing with the waka's gentle pitching. You hum along quietly, letting your body absorb the movement and timing almost subconsciously. A cheeky thought sneaks in. Great, now I'm navigating by ocean glitter and bird gossip. Next up, moon cheese. You suppress a laugh, knowing that humor keeps your attention sharp during long stretches of sensory immersion.
Fringe lore claims that some master navigators could detect the approach of islands purely by subtle changes in light reflection across swells. It sounds exaggerated, but with each passing minute, you begin to sense how plausible it might be when all sensory layers are integrated. Birds begin darting across the sky with more energy, their flight paths more pronounced in the morning light. You probably won't survive this if you fail to track them. They act as dynamic waypoints, indicating land proximity, wind changes, and current direction. Historians still argue whether observation of birds was systematically taught or intuitively learned, but watching the elders adjust sails and hum along shows that birds are considered essential collaborators in navigation. The waka leans slightly into a swell from the southeast, and your body reacts automatically, micro-adjusting to maintain balance and orientation. Fringe stories claim that navigators could internalize the ocean's rhythms so precisely that even without stars, their direction would remain accurate for miles. You feel a mixture of skepticism and awe, but your growing sensory awareness convinces you that it's possible, at least partially, through intense observation and practice. Your eyes trace the cloud lines, their soft edges illuminated by the rising sun, and you integrate them into your mental map. You probably won't survive this if you ignore clouds. They indicate wind shifts, upcoming weather, and potential obstacles. Minor adjustments in heading based on cloud formation, combined with swell direction and bird patterns, create a dynamic triangulation system that constantly updates. The waka glides smoothly, and each small correction feels effortless in retrospect, like your body is reading the ocean directly. A soft breeze carries the faint scent of salt and distant vegetation, and you pause to breathe it in. Fringe lore suggests that some navigators used olfactory cues alongside visual ones to anticipate landfall. While it seems fantastical, the combination of sensory inputs, sight, touch, smell, and hearing, creates a multi-layered map in your mind that is surprisingly reliable. Cheekily, you imagine telling city friends that you're now sniffing your way across the Pacific, and you laugh quietly to yourself. The waka continues to ride the gentle swells, birds call overhead, and the elders' hums provide subtle reinforcement. You probably won't survive this without integrating all cues: the fading stars, rising sun, birds, clouds, swells, and chants. It's a dance of attention and intuition, each element confirming or correcting the others. Your body, mind, and senses are now fully engaged, moving in synchrony with the environment. Finally, you lean against the railing, letting the morning warmth wash over you. The ocean feels alive and responsive, a partner in the intricate orchestration you've been practicing all night. The layers of observation, stars, swells, birds, shadows, chants, and light, have merged into a single cohesive awareness. You realize that this is more than navigation. It's a full immersion into the rhythms of the world, a dialogue between human perception and the vast living environment around you. You feel a quiet satisfaction. You've glimpsed what it means to read the ocean as the ancestors did, and the skills you've absorbed are only
The sun
beginning
rises
of
further,
understanding.
spilling warm gold across the rippling ocean, and you notice how even minor variations in color and reflection inform your sense of direction. You probably won't survive this if you dismiss these subtleties. They act as confirmation of course and swell alignment, complementing the mental map built through stars, birds, and chants. Historians still debate whether early navigators consciously interpreted these visual cues or absorbed them instinctively through long apprenticeship, but observing the elders' column adjustments makes the system feel deliberate. Fringe tales suggest that subtle dawn reflections could signal distant islands or reefs before they are visible, a claim that seems fantastical until you notice tiny changes in light on the waves. You trudge along the deck, toes gripping the slick timber as the waka rocks gently, and notice that the humming of the elders has softened into a rhythm that feels almost like breathing with the waka itself. You probably won't survive this if you focus only on the sun or stars. The combined sensory input, swell, reflection, birds, and chant, is what allows precise orientation. The waka seems alive, responsive, almost sentient, as if it understands the map that your senses are collectively constructing. A cheeky thought crosses your mind. So now I'm basically part of a floating orchestra with stars, birds, and drum-like swells. You smile at the absurdity, but it's true. The motion, sound, and visual cues create a seamless feedback loop. Fringe accounts claim some navigators could feel minute changes in swell and reflection through the soles of their feet alone, predicting direction adjustments without looking at stars. Your growing awareness makes this feel less impossible and more like heightened intuition. Birds rise higher and chirp more energetically, their arcs slicing through the morning sky. You probably won't survive this if you ignore them. Their flight patterns indicate wind direction, proximity to land, and even subtle current shifts. The elders watch them casually, noting angles and altitude, making micro-adjustments to the waka's heading in response. Historians still argue whether this observation was formalized into training or learned solely through apprenticeship, but its effectiveness is undeniable. The Southern Cross is now nearly invisible, replaced by the sun's warm glow. Minor stars are gone, but their memory lingers in your mental map. You integrate the remaining visual cues, clouds, reflections, bird positions, with swell and wind patterns. Fringe tales suggest that masters could feel the ocean's currents like a living map, anticipating how changes in light and motion signaled safe passage. You begin to sense this subtle awareness yourself, your body responding instinctively to the waka's tilt and rhythm. You pause, letting your hands rest lightly on the railing, and notice how cloud shapes subtly reflect wind patterns. You probably won't survive this if you fail to consider them. Every layer, light, bird, swell, cloud, acts as a triangulation system. The waka rides each swell almost effortlessly, and your body absorbs the rhythm, micro-adjusting balance, gaze, and mental calculations. A soft breeze carries the faint scent of distant land or vegetation, and you take a deliberate breath. Fringe tales suggest that some navigators could distinguish islands from hundreds of miles away using smell, particularly in the morning when air currents shift. While it seems whimsical, integrating all available sensory information, visual, auditory, tactile, and olfactory, creates a remarkably precise awareness of position. Cheekily, you imagine telling friends that smelling your way to land is a legitimate survival technique. The waka continues smoothly, birds calling, elders humming softly, and the ocean glinting with dawn light. You probably won't survive this if you fail to maintain the integrated rhythm, body, mind, vessel, and environment in constant dialogue. Every cue confirms or corrects the others, creating a living, adaptive navigation system that feels both ancient and immediate. Finally, you lean back slightly, letting the warmth of the sun wash over you, reflecting on the night and early morning. Stars, swells, birds, reflections, shadows, and chants have merged into one cohesive sensory experience. You feel a deep connection with the waka, the ocean, and the ancestors who honed these skills over centuries. Navigation is no longer a task. It's a full embodiment of observation, intuition, and reverence. The journey continues, and you understand for the first time
By now,
the quiet mastery of reading the sea while the world sleeps.
The horizon, bathing everything in warm, golden light. The stars are gone, their memory lingering in your mental map like faint echoes, but the ocean hums beneath you with the same rhythm it had all night. You probably won't survive this if you think navigation ends with sunrise. The principles remain. Swell, wind, bird activity, reflections, and intuition continue to guide the waka. Historians still argue how much formal training versus experiential learning shaped master navigators, but witnessing the elders, you see that both are essential. Fringe accounts suggest that some navigators could anticipate currents or distant land purely by the subtle interplay of light and water in early morning, which sounds implausible until you start noticing patterns yourself. You trudge to the bow, toes gripping the deck as the waka tilts gently with the swells. Birds wheel and dive overhead, calling to one another in complex patterns. You probably won't survive this if you ignore them. They are part of the living navigation system, indicators of nearby islands, wind, and currents. You notice how the elders integrate all sensory input, light, bird flight, swell rhythm, and tactile feedback from the waka into an elegant, almost seamless guidance network. A cheeky thought crosses your mind. So all these years I thought birds were just noisy tourists of the sky. Turns out they're traffic signals for ocean highways. You chuckle softly, letting humor keep your attention sharp. Fringe stories claim master navigators could even detect hidden reefs from subtle bird behavior, which seems like hyperbole until you notice the tiny arcs and swoops, subtle deviations in flight, and how the elders respond to them without a word. The Southern Cross has fully disappeared, but minor cues remain. Cloud edges, sun reflections, distant land glimmers, and subtle changes in swell. You probably won't survive this if you focus on any single element in isolation. The strength of the Maori system is in the integration, the layering of sensory channels into one coherent map. Your body has begun to internalize this pattern, moving, adjusting, and balancing in harmony with the waka and ocean. You pause mid-deck, letting your gaze stretch from the horizon to the rippling surface beneath.
Swells, bird calls, chants, and reflections converge into a rhythmic symphony. Fringe accounts claim that the best navigators could maintain course for days without celestial guidance, relying entirely on this embodied awareness. It feels less fantastical now, as your body and mind sync with the motion of the ocean and the patterns of nature. The elders' hums soften, merging with the ocean's natural sounds. You probably won't survive this if you fail to maintain the harmony between observation and intuition. Every small detail, swell tilt, bird flight, light gradient, reinforces your mental map, each cue confirming or correcting another. Cheekily, you imagine telling your GPS-reliant friends, "Who needs satellites when you have sensory jazz?" Finally, the waka glides smoothly toward a distant shimmer of land. You lean against the railing, breathing in the salt air, feeling your body fully aligned with the waka and the ocean. Stars, swells, birds, chants, reflections, and light gradients have all merged into a living, breathing navigation system. You feel a profound connection to the ancestors who honed this art, a deep respect for the intelligence embedded in observation, memory, and intuition. You realize that this journey wasn't just about reaching a destination, it was about inhabiting the ocean, syncing with the cosmos, and learning to read the world in a way that transforms perception entirely.